Martinsville Speedway has a long reputation for turning good days into disasters. But what happened on lap 324 of the 2026 Cookout 400 was something different entirely. This wasn't bad luck. This wasn't a mechanical failure. This was Bubba Wallace making a decision in a split second that sent 12 cars into the wall, ended his own race, and dropped him from a championship contender to a damage control story. All in one afternoon. And when the race was over, the sport's biggest voices didn't stay quiet. Dale Earnhardt Jr., Richard Petty, Kevin Harvick, Kyle Petty, one after another. They stepped forward and called it exactly what it was. Let's walk through the full story, because there's a lot more here than just a wreck. Bubba Wallace came into Martinsville with genuine momentum. He had put together 4 finishes of 11th or better in the first 5 races of the 2026 season. At one point, he was sitting second in the championship standings. Coming into race weekend, he was third in points, firmly in the conversation for a title run. His number 23 Toyota for 23X9 Racing had been fast and consistent. The weekend itself started well. Wallace posted the fastest time in Saturday's practice session, a strong sign heading into race day. Meanwhile, Carson Hocevar, driving the number 77 Chevrolet for Spire Motorsports, had qualified 7th and was carrying confidence from a 4th-place finish at Darlington just weeks earlier. Both drivers had everything to play for. But Martinsville doesn't care about momentum. It compresses the entire field into a tight, flat paperclip of a track where every restart is a pressure cooker. And on lap 323, that pressure cooker finally cracked. On a restart, Hocevar made an aggressive but entirely legal move. He went 3 wide underneath Wallace heading into turn 1, made contact, and came out of turn 2 ahead of him. That's short track racing. Drivers do it every week, but Wallace didn't see it that way. As they came through the next sequence of corners, Wallace got right on Hocevar's bumper. Then he pushed him. Then he pushed him again. He hit the back of Hocevar's number 77 multiple times through turns 3 and 4. This wasn't a single tap. It was a sustained shove. And on the exit of turn 4, Hocevar's car spun around on the front stretch, and everything behind him had nowhere to go. 12 cars were collected in the incident. Zane Smith, Chris Buescher, Connor Zilisch, John Hunter Nemechek, Eric Jones, Austin Hill, Daniel Suarez, Austin Dillon, Michael McDowell. The list goes on. And among those swept up in the wreck was Riley Herbst, Wallace's own 23-1 racing teammate. Hocevar's team worked furiously to repair his number 77, got him back on track, and he stayed on the lead lap, eventually crossing the line in 17th place, which matched his best ever finish at Martinsville. Wallace, on the other hand, was done. He finished 36th, recording his first DNF of the 2026 season, and had to visit the infield care center to be checked out before speaking to media. Wallace speaks. I misjudged Wallace, didn't hide. He walked straight to Fox Sports' Jaime Little on pit road and addressed it immediately. Wallace said, I misjudged. I didn't appreciate the 3 wide into turn 1. I misjudged the center of the corner. I didn't mean to turn him. What a frustrating day, man. Just wasn't the day we wanted. I hate it for our team. Just frustration. He was clear that the frustration started with Hocevar's 3 wide move on the restart, but he also acknowledged that what he did in response went too far, or at least further than he intended. The problem is that watching the replay, many people in the sport weren't fully buying the misjudgment explanation. The repeated contact, the sustained pressure through multiple corners. It looked like more than an error in braking. Steve Latarte, NASCAR analyst, offered a middle ground interpretation that Wallace meant to bump Hocevar to return the favor, but badly misjudged how hard he was on the throttle. In other words, the intention was a nudge. The result was a wreck. At Martinsville, the difference between those two things is razor thin. On the latest episode of the Dale Jr. Download, Dale Earnhardt Jr. gave his assessment, and it was direct. Dale Jr. said, he just drove through him. I didn't like what you did. I think he owned it though. I mean, he wrecked him. He realized he f***ed up. There was no sugarcoating. Earnhardt Jr. acknowledged that Wallace at least had the integrity to own the moment rather than deflect. But the criticism was sharp. Dale Jr. also connected the incident directly to the points consequences, putting the damage in clear terms. Dale Jr. said, "Bubba was behind his teammate in second in points at one point. Now he's 147 points out. He's given up roughly 60-70 points to Tyler Reddick over the last handful of races." And then he zoomed out to make a broader point about the 2026 points format. Dale Jr. added, "It's a great example of why this point system is going to be so much fun. Because if your driver burns out a fuse or short circuits in a moment like that, this is what it can lead to." Richard Petty, a 7-time NASCAR Cup Series champion, was physically present at Martinsville on race day. He saw the whole thing with his own eyes. The following day, on his podcast, The Petty Race Recap, he addressed the incident alongside his co-host Dale Inman. Inman tried to frame it diplomatically, saying that Wallace kind of got into the number 77. The King wasn't having it. Petty fired back, kind of got into him. He just drove on in there and knocked the door out of him. When a 7-time champion who was physically at the track uses language that direct, it removes any ambiguity. Richard Petty was not interested in giving anyone a soft landing on this one. Kevin Harvick, calling the race live for Fox Sports, flagged the move in real time. He said Wallace drove straight through the 77 car and suggested there was something deeper going on with Wallace mentally throughout that race day. Harvick's point was simple. You can't lose your cool like that. Kyle Petty, Richard's son and a respected NASCAR analyst, went even further on the Inside the Race podcast. He introduced an angle nobody else had fully explored: Wallace's double frustration in 2026. Kyle Petty said his teammate Tyler Reddick had just become the first driver in NASCAR Cup Series history to win the first 3 races of a season. Reddick won 4 of the first 6 races in 2026, a historically unprecedented stretch of dominance. And according to Kyle Petty, that kind of performance from a teammate doesn't go unnoticed. Kyle Petty said, "You race your teammates. You want to be top of the heap, king of the hill in your own team, and I think there's some frustration and some pent-up anger in that when you get into it." Kyle Petty also made it a point to defend Hocevar. He acknowledged that Hocevar has a reputation for aggressive racing. People call him Hurricane Hocevar for a reason, but said that in this specific case, the aggression went the wrong direction. Kyle Petty said, "Hocevar is an easy target right now because you almost wreck Hocevar, and everybody says, oh well, that's just Hocevar, he had that coming. In this case, I don't think Hocevar had this coming, man. Taking you 3 wide at Martinsville is not cause for what we're seeing right here." After the race, Bubba Wallace reached out to Carson Hocevar directly. He texted him to apologize and told Hocevar plainly he did nothing wrong and that Wallace was just mad and got sent over the edge. Hocevar's reaction? He was laughing. He said he didn't feel he deserved what happened, and the tone of his response made clear he understood what the moment was. Frustration that spilled over onto the wrong person. Hocevar even referenced the movie Talladega Nights on his team radio mid-crash, calling it Bubba Shake and Bake. Wallace later addressed the apology publicly, and his words were measured and accountable. Wallace said, "I've got to tuck my tail and take it on the chin and move on. No one was happy about it. Here is where the full weight of Martinsville lands." Wallace's spotter, Freddie Kraft, laid it out in brutal detail on the Door Bumper Clear podcast. Kraft said, "We went from 3rd in points to now we're tied for 8th with 5 other guys. Essentially, we're 11th in points, and it can't happen." Kraft didn't stop there. He described the damage done to the season in the clearest possible terms. Kraft said, "You can't have those moments. And if you want to be a contender for the championship, or a contender to be top 5, top 7, 8th in points, whatever it is, that shat can't happen. Unfortunately, we ended our day yesterday self-inflicted." That word, self-inflicted, is the one that defines this entire story. Back-to-back disasters at Darlington and Martinsville wiped out everything Wallace had built in the first 5 races. He came into Martinsville third in points. He left it 11th, effectively 147 points behind where he had been positioned heading into the weekend. On the teardown, Jeff Gluck calculated that Wallace cost himself at least 20 points in a system where every single position matters more than it ever has before. Jordan Bianchi added that Wallace's frustration had been visibly building throughout the race, and that the lesson from Martinsville is one that can't be ignored. Bianchi said, "You can't do it. You just have to look at the big picture." Dale Earnhardt Jr. did leave the door open. Despite the sharp criticism, he acknowledged that Wallace has the ability to recover. Dale Jr. said, "Bubba can claw his way back into this with some great work, and he's capable of doing that. But the margin for error has now shrunk dramatically. In NASCAR's 2026 points format, one meltdown costs weeks of consistency." Wallace proved that at Martinsville. The early season work, 4 top 11 finishes, second in the standings, genuine title contender status, didn't disappear overnight. It disappeared in one corner over the course of a few seconds on lap 324. Martinsville is Wallace's self-described favorite track. He has won 2 Truck Series races there, but on this Sunday it didn't give anything back. The sport has a long memory, especially at short tracks. Martinsville has a decades-long history of retaliation and payback. Whether Hocevar chooses to settle the score on the track at some point remains to be seen. But what's clear right now is that Bubba Wallace carries a very public, very documented moment into every race from here forward, and the entire NASCAR world will be watching how he responds. If you want to follow how this story develops, whether Wallace claws back into title contention or whether this moment defines his 2026 season, hit subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Drop a comment below. Was this a racing mistake or did Bubba Wallace lose his cool on purpose? And if you know a NASCAR fan who needs to see the full story, share this video right now.